Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of What in the World is Happening. This is a show about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. I'm Sabina Qureshi, broadcasting from Edmonton, Canada. And today we're going to talk about unity in diversity. My guests today are Elisa Graf in Germany. Hi, Elisa. How are you?
I'm great to be here. Thank you.
It's great to have you. And Megan Scherer in New Zealand. Hi, Megan.
Hi. Good to be here.
Great. Well, as the title card shows, why is this important and how do we create it? Excuse me, I just remembered I should mention before we carry on that we will be doing a half hour of transmission meditation at the end of this program. Please stay and join us. It's a very simple meditation to do, very dynamic. You'll really feel energized by it. I can guarantee you that. And I also want to mention that we stream live on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. So you can find us in all those places. And we will have links in the chat that you can use to connect to those later on in the program. So just to start out now, unity in diversity, it almost sounds like a mathematical formula. Like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Would either of you, Megan or Elisa, like to give a little explanation of what we mean by that?
Megan?
Well, we are all very much distinct individuals wherever we come from around the world. That wasn't always the case, but I think especially in this last age in particular, we've developed a very unique way of seeing things, no matter what background or culture or country we're from. And the challenge, of course, now is somehow being able to bridge the differences, see our commonalities, and to work together without sort of destroying that individuality. We still need to be able to shine our light. And maybe a good analogy is that we're all like different coloured flowers in the one garden. And it's such a much better garden to look at with all those colours rather than if we were all the same uniform type of flower or colour.
Yeah,
that's a good explanation.
I was actually thinking while you were speaking about the fact that, this individuality that, as you mentioned, is relatively new, because in previous age, before the age of Pisces, people really had more of a herd mentality. They weren't really individualized in terms of their own understanding of who they were. And so individuality is really a hard-won kind of it's a kind of expression, you could say, that people have through many lifetimes. We've hard-won this kind of individuality, and you can see it everywhere in the world. You can see that people are very proud of their individuality, and yet the point is to see that we don't just tolerate each other in terms of the differences, but that we embrace the differences, that we see that this individuality is hard-won and a value, and that we see it as a strength, so that we can put it to the service of the group, so that it's not just about sort of accepting and tolerating, but actually using that individuality in the sense with the group in mind, and how can we move forward. There's so much diversity on our planet, and we have to start to see it as something that's intended, not that we're supposed to all be the same, right?
I think we actually need those differences. It's not just about embracing each other's individuality, but seeing that if we're going to solve our big crises that we have going on in the world, we need to actually have everyone's point of view to see the whole picture.
That's right.
And solve the issues.
So that's like the story about the elephant and the blind men, right?
Yeah.
They're all feeling different parts of it and saying, oh, the elephant's like this, because one's feeling the tail, one's feeling the tusk, etc. Yeah.
I haven't heard that.
You haven't heard that story?
No.
Well, it's just a little, I don't know where it comes from, but the idea is that there are these blind men and they are all trying to determine what an elephant is like. Each one is standing in front. They're all together standing around an elephant, and each one's feeling what's in front of him. So one of them is feeling the leg, one of them's feeling the back, one of them's feeling the tail, one's feeling the tusk, one's feeling the trunk, the ear, the head, like that. And depending on what each one is feeling, he and it could be women as well, of course. I don't know why it's always men, but says, oh, the elephant's like this. And of course, given his or her experience, that's that's correct. But they're only each perceiving one part, of course.
Well, that's neat.
We can actually see that in the world today, so many of the problems we're facing collectively. First of all, of course, we need everybody to cooperate to be able to solve anything. But in a general sense, you could see that humanity is really grappling with this problem of diversity, whether it's the issues of race in the US that have become a really major hot spot, or whether we're talking about accepting refugees, or whether we're talking about, I mean, there's so many ways this plays out in our cultures all around the world, these issues of diversity and what to do about it. People are afraid.
And I think, sorry, I just want to mention that what we have up on our slide right now, Keynotes of the Age of Aquarius. The reason that I wanted to say this is that we are in the Age of Aquarius, which is a different astronomical age in terms of the energies that are streaming into our planet than the previous age, Pisces. And so we are being, in a way, stimulated to a different type of experience. And the keynotes are synthesis and brotherhood, and that it's really the age of the group. And so it's very fitting that we would be talking about this, about unity in diversity, because the idea of the group, in fact, is just what all of you have been saying, which is somehow all these different points of view, all these different experiences are part of the group, and they may be very different from each other, and yet somehow we're all here together, and we have to work together. As you were just saying, Elisa, with these problems, and Megan, there's no other way that we can solve them. And I want to just put up a quote from Benjamin Krem, and he is a main source of our information. And he says, Aquarius is about the group. It is about bringing unity, synthesis into the greatest number of individual parts. It is not to obliterate individuality. And I think you were saying that earlier, Elisa. It is not to get rid of the parts, the differences. On the contrary, it is to synthesize into a total unity the greatest number of different individual parts. And so synthesize here, we usually think of the word synthesized to mean to create something. And in a way, that's what we're talking about here. But it also means to bring different things together and make something new out of that. And so that's really the idea of synthesis here. And he says it's unity in diversity. And this is from his book, The Gathering of the Forces of Light.
It just suddenly reminded me of cooking. If you want a really interesting dish, you put in all these different ingredients and you can come up with something really delicious as a result.
Good point.
I noticed there's a question coming up there about when did the Age of Aquarius begin? Well, each age is about 2,300 years in length, roughly. And previous age of Pisces began roughly around the time of Jesus. And the Age of Aquarius apparently officially began in, I think it was 2009. So we're at the very beginnings of this whole new age, whole new set of energies streaming into the planet. And despite ourselves, we're affected by those new energies. The young are particularly open to them. The older you are, the more difficult it is to adapt and to deal with this whole new situation that is emerging. And the Age of Aquarius will, as I say, last for another at least 2,000 years or so.
Yeah, a little more than 2,000 years. I think the average is 2,125, something like that. Yeah, but you can actually look this up because it's based on the precession of the equinoxes, which refers to something. You can see diagrams. It looks like mathematical diagrams of where the different constellations are in relation to our solar system, and so that determines what kinds of energies we experience, what comes to us. So in each age, different energies are coming to us, and they stimulate different qualities, and they cause us to grow in different ways. So it's very nourishing. It's about stimulation.
Actually, I just wanted to say that you brought up children, and I wanted to say that essentially we can see also that the next generation has a greater tolerance not just tolerance, but acceptance, like in a really deep way of difference. So that's one of the reasons why these issues are coming up today about race, or about the Me Too movement, or whether it's about gender difference and things like this. So you can see that the next generation who have come into the world at this time for a purpose are actually showing us the way to this acceptance of difference and potentially unity and diversity.
Of course, it's not easy in this current time, because our systems of living do not really encourage coming together and respecting each other's ways of seeing things. So fundamentally and ultimately, we need to change the very systems that we live under, so that they allow people to express themselves and to have a point of view and to participate, no matter what sort of background you come from, or what, say, a disability you might have, or education or race that you come from. That everyone ought to have the opportunity to participate in society. And I don't think anywhere around the world that currently is the case. So over time, that will need to change.
Well, and people sometimes talk about a level playing field to refer to what you're describing, Megan. And I think it's actually very much, as you say, it's not just within countries that there's no level playing field, but very much between countries as well. Because there are these huge differences in economic power and wealth between countries, not just within countries, but in general. Probably most of us have seen these videos about wealth inequality in the world these days, and it's just glaring. It's increasing all the time. And there is now, but sorry, go ahead.
I think we're all rather privileged. We come from relatively wealthy countries, but there's many countries in the world where they live on, I think, what is it, $1 a day or something, and where all their energies are put into simply surviving. How can they therefore express their unique individuality in that sort of situation? You know, it's just a very basic day by day existence.
Beast of burden, basically.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why, of course, Maitreya's first priority is the sharing of the world's resources, so that we can level the playing field in some form, so that people can have their basic needs met. And therefore, that would engender trust if the wealthier nations would actually, see to it that people have their needs met in these countries, because we have excess of food, we have excess of healthcare, medicines and things like that. And that would engender a trust that would build a peaceful world. So this,
but Elisa, we're not even sharing these goods within our countries. I mean, within the United States, just to give an example, because I live next door to it, so it's always in the news. But it's always in the news for everybody because it's the big power. I mean, that it's the richest country in the world, but you have people there with no health care, none at all. Yes, and you have people with that are just living on food banks. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, I'm from the U.S., so I know all about it. It's not a healthy place in lots of ways. We have to work on these disparities. I mean, what saddens me the most in my own country is the level of homelessness, and it's rising. And, the fact that people are suffering in this way, and there doesn't seem to be an easy way to fix it, or at least there doesn't seem to be a lot of attention being given to fixing it. So, the social network, which I enjoy here in Germany, it doesn't exist there, and it's really a tragedy. So I totally agree with you. It has to be fixed within our own countries as well. I'm
sorry, I just want to interrupt for a moment. And I think also the poor, unfortunately, don't have as strong a voice. Like, if you're very wealthy, you have the ability to really make your opinion heard. But when you're poor, you're probably spending all your time and energy just getting by anyway, let alone feeling like you have the opportunity to, really speak up with a loud voice to your government and say, look, this is what needs to happen.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Can I just read out something that Cielito just sent us? There are more than 1 billion fewer people living below the international poverty line of $2.15, that's American dollars per day today, than in 1990. Well, that's good to hear.
That's good news.
More than 1 billion fewer people living below the poverty line. On average, the number declined by 47 million every year, or 130,000 people each day. But the scale of global poverty today remains vast. Where is this from, this quote? Maybe she'll let me know. So, okay, so things are getting better. But, and you know, one sign that it's getting better is that we're much more aware of what's wrong, in the sense that people are now talking about, for example, redlining in the US, talking about World Bank. Okay, those are World Bank statistics.
I don't know if I trust the World Bank.
Okay, yeah, well. But I mean, we're focusing more in the media, at least, on why there are these disparities, and who is on the bad end of things, and what the cause is for that, you know, like race or cultural heritage or identity, how that disproportionately affects your ability to get an education, to have access to services, to jobs, to be at the receiving end of climate change, for example. Who is suffering the results of climate change?
That's right. It's not the people that actually, they're not the ones that created the problem, but they're going to be the ones that are most affected by the problem. And again, I think it's the next generations that see more of this than people of my generation, perhaps. And it's also easy to forget about these issues when you are not, it's not in your present environment. You know, you don't actually see the people and how they're learning to deal with things. But at least the media coverage has expanded, and we're hearing more about lawsuits in places like the Niger Delta and things like this, where there have been terrible, you know, big concerning issues having to do with oil and things like that, so that we can see what happens, and then we can actually, maybe it influences our perspective.
Well, and there's a growing hunger for this knowledge. People want to know. More and more people want to know, and so I'd like to go on. We have this information that you brought, Elisa, to the show from Ai Weiwei. I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly. Probably most of us have heard. I know he's an artist from China. I didn't realize he was an activist as well. I know he was imprisoned in China because he was, advocating reform there, political reform. But do you want to read us the quote from him?
Yeah, sure. Establishing the understanding that we all belong to one humanity is the most essential step for how we might continue to coexist on this sphere we call Earth. Yeah, I mean, that's really what our spiritual work is all about, is coming to understand that in the end, every one of us is part of a human family. And everybody is of value. Everybody needs to be there. They're here for a purpose. They're here for a reason.
It's basically a spiritual realization, isn't it? To see that we are all one, no matter our diversity, no matter what our background is, our viewpoints, we are essentially all one. And if only people could realize that simple thing alone, that in itself, I think, would motivate a lot of change in the world. But we've been brought up in this society that encourages separation. So how do you change that mindset?
But this is one of the reasons why we're so adamant about talking about the fact that the masters are coming into the world now, because one of the things that will happen as a result of Maitreya's presence and the other masters' presence in the world, Maitreya has said that he will give us an experience of our true selves, of who we really are. And at that level, we're all connected. So I think that that's part of what we're talking about today, about Maitreya's emergence into the world and the impact that that will have. Because imagine if everybody wakes up to the reality that we're one family, how much that would change so many things.
And of course, the energies coming in now are about synthesis and brotherhood. And I think they only work through groups rather than individuals. So I guess from that, we will also be influenced to work more together with each other.
Well, yeah, I think it means that we will feel that impulse towards connecting with each other when we're with others. And it probably also stimulates us to want to connect with others, to reach out more, to want to be in groups. And so the second part of this quote is, there are many borders to dismantle, but the most important are the ones within our own hearts and minds. These are the borders that are dividing humanity from itself. I'd like to share a little thing that happened to me when I lived in Spain. I was living in Valencia at the time, and I was in a small park, and there was an elderly gentleman on the next bench, and he wanted to talk to me. So he came over to tell me. He was very excited. He said, "I just talked to an African lady." And I just thought, what? What are you telling me? But he went on to explain that he had never talked to anybody from Africa before. And he was just full of enthusiasm about what a wonderful person she was. It was so nice to talk to her. And I finally understood, without him saying it in so many words, that he had lived his entire life. He looked like he was in his 80s. He had lived his entire life without ever having talked to somebody from Africa or from an African country. And now he had done it. And for him, it was a huge kind of achievement for him, because I think he must have overcome some type of fear or whatever it was, uncertainty. And so I think this energy of Aquarius that is pushing us to reach out and connect, it was acting on him. He was definitely responding to that. And he was so happy about it. So I think we're seeing that more and more, that people are discovering who each other is. They're in that process of reaching out.
Yeah.
It's a smaller world now, thanks to technology and easier travel for the wealthy, at least. And I think travel does actually broaden the mind. And I mean, the media has a very important role to play in helping us understand each other and our ways of seeing things. I mean, I love watching movies that sort of portray situations that you might not be familiar with. There was one about refugees coming over on a boat on the ocean. I wish I could remember the name of the movie, but it was really interesting to put yourself in that person's shoes, being so desperate that you would pay someone to, in the middle of the night, go out in this rickety boat and end up in a totally different part of the world.
Yeah, it's such a tragedy. And I've actually had this amazing experience of being on the ground in Germany when the doors were opened, when Merkel said we can do it, and opened the doors as a surprise in a lot of ways to most of the people of her country. They weren't quite prepared in a sense, but the beautiful thing that happened was that every little town in Germany was given a certain number of refugees, like 100 refugees. And I live in a town of about 5,000, and there were about 110 refugees that were sent to the town where we live. And the mayor called a meeting. About 80 people came, wanted to know what was going to happen and what to expect. And they basically told us, the county came and also explained, listen, we're relying on the German people to teach these people German. We can't do it without regular people. And we're relying on the German people to help them find housing and to help them get integrated into schools and to help them figure out how to get to work and what to do. And so there was, in every town, there was a contingent of people who made the effort to make these people feel welcome. And my family got to know a few of these refugee families, and still today, I still know them. They've been here now for 8 years. And it's an incredible thing to hear their stories, and you just can't even imagine what they've been through. It's absolutely incredible. I looked up today just to find out what I could find out about refugees today in around the world, and actually mostly, at least from the International Rescue Committee, talking about, just due to conflicts alone, there's over 100 million refugees today, forcibly displaced people worldwide. And we know that this also was highly impacted by the Syrian war, but now the Ukraine war. And just going back to what I was saying about Germany, it turns out that it was a big success story from the Center for Global Development, which is cgdev.org. They said that it was in 2015 and 2016, Germany received over 1 million first-time asylum applications. And 5 years later, over half of these refugees have found a job, and public support for immigration remains high. So that's kind of a huge success story, considering that there are very few countries in Europe who've been willing to take refugees. So that's been a real problem.
Well, and very few countries that have been willing to take refugees from non-white countries, because we saw that was a big change,
Right.
when the war in Ukraine started.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah. I wanted to go ahead and just read a little bit more from Ai Weiwei about refugees. He says, the refugee crisis is not about refugees. Rather, it is about us. Our prioritization of financial gain over people's struggle for the necessities of life is the primary cause of much of this crisis. The West has all but abandoned its belief in humanity and support for the precious ideals contained in declarations on universal human rights. It has sacrificed these ideals for short-sighted cowardice and greed. So here he's talking about people who are forced to leave their homes for economic reasons, not just people who are forced to leave because of war. And we know that...
And environmental reasons, of course, as well.
Environmental reasons as well. And we know that here in North America, we have a vast number of people, a constant flow coming from South America and Central America, from countries where the economy has collapsed or just people cannot live. So
farming is not tenable in many of those places anymore because of the climate change.
Yeah.
Yes, we've got more and more extreme weather, haven't we, around the world? And again, I think we need to look back at ourselves to a large part as the cause for these environmental disasters that are occurring. And we need to look, and again, just repeating back at the very systems we live under, because at the moment we're prioritizing profit over people, to put it very simply.
Yeah.
And yet what's most important is people and the environment. It's very simple maths, really. So what can we do about that? How can we get governments to listen and to not just shuffle deck chairs on the Titanic sort of thing, but actually make some fundamental changes so that people are put first, and therefore the environment benefits as well. I mean, at the moment, people, for example, chop down trees because they desperately want to make money, like in Brazil, for example. How do you change the situation so that people don't feel so desperate, and therefore we are more inclined to look after Mother Nature?
Well, so you mentioned children earlier, I think, Elisa. And so that's one of the things that we wanted to just briefly touch on, is the fact that it seems that the younger generations are more open to these ideas. We see a lot of young people taking action on behalf of climate change, about trying to stop it, slow it down. We also see young people like Malala Yousafzai in Pakistan advocating for education, especially for girls. So we're seeing like a rising kind of wave of young activists around the world who are really taking matters into their hands and doing what you've just been talking about, Megan. They're pressuring governments, pressuring the big actors to make these changes.
That reminded me, though, that so much of the time, it really is an incredible thing that happens when you find your solidarity with somebody else who's different from you. For example, because you become a climate activist, because these children are, for example, through Greta Thunberg, have taken to the streets in mass numbers around the world for now years. And I'm thinking also of the Occupy movement back in 2008, when financial crash happened. There were a lot of disparate groups of people who were affected by that event that came together and found solidarity with each other, and it actually created bonds that hadn't existed before. So it is a lot of the time these crises that bring us closer to each other and help us overcome those differences.
So having this shared concern is what unites people despite their differences. Yeah,
exactly. I think, Megan, you also had an example of that from what happened.
Yes. Yeah, well, back in 2019, there was what was called the Christchurch massacre, where a lone gunman shot down many members of mosques, 2 mosques in Christchurch. I think it was about 59 people died at the hands of this one man. And the positive, the silver lining to this situation was that it brought people together in the aftermath. So we had a solidarity between people of all sorts of different backgrounds, all around the world. In fact, it created a sort of a unity, at least temporarily, where people would put offerings of flowers and have prayer vigils outside mosques worldwide. And there's been an annual event set up since called Unity Week on the anniversary of this massacre. And it's to honour not only the lives of the people that died in the terror attack, but also to promote a socially cohesive society. And it's an invitation to the world, according to the organisers, just reading here, that no matter your age, nationality, religion or background, to set aside some time and energy to really see each other and recognise our shared humanity.
Beautiful.
Of course, we want that to be a feeling that we have all the time, not just after tragedies. And that's our challenge.
And
well, maybe it's a process of sensitization. I mean, it's a change that does take time. And, you know, if a tragedy is what pushes people to come closer to that, we have to take advantage of it. But I think it does take time.
I think these events, not just the crises, but of course there are events like this Unity, you call it Unity Week. There are big events happening, like, for example, the Parliament of the World's Religions, which I've attended a few times, and Share International has had booths at the last 3, I think. I don't know. I think it's only just started up again recently, but there's going to be another one taking place this year in September, I believe, right? Isn't it September?
It's in August.
Okay, there's like in Chicago, and there's like 10,000 people from around the world of all different stripes of religion. Every possible permutation is there present, talking with each other, like trying to find a dialogue with each other, and also bring it into their own countries, their own groups when they go home, and this kind of thing. It's like to bring us closer to each other, to see the shared humanity. And I think that there are a lot of events like that that are happening more and more these days, which is, of course, really essential if we're going to understand one another. And just going back to what I said about the refugees in Germany, the bonds that were forged in my own neighborhood by people stepping up to help those families that came from Syria, from the war, and even some from Africa, who came over as so-called migrants, looking for a way to come in at this time that Germany opened up. The relationships that were built are still today, 8 years later, still very much part of people's lives. And I think it's enriched us all. And I think that Germans can see that it was a very enriching experience for the most part, and that's why it's still supported.
Well, and it sounds to me as though the reason it was enriching is that the government took steps to make sure that there were support systems in place so that things could work. You know, support systems for the people arriving, support systems for the people already living there, so they could help out, so that there was a way to do that. People weren't left to their own devices.
No, of course they did some. I mean, Germany still has its own issues, you know, integrating people, because it has a very difficult system to come into, and there's a lot of bureaucracy, and then there's also the problem of training and language, that it makes it difficult. Even though there's a need for people to do certain jobs in this country, they can't fill with normal German people. So there are things that are still happening, but the fact that there were people everywhere that stepped up and developed relationships with these people, not just sort of like, okay, here you go. It's really been an incredibly amazing thing to see and witness and be part of.
Well, it sounds like a real example of synthesis.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to just briefly mention travel. I think, Megan, you brought that up, that has really broadened people's horizons and allowed people to see a different way of living, different parts of the world, and discover how we are connected. Were you going to say something, Megan? I think I interrupted you. Did you just start to talk?
I actually sort of on a different subject.
Okay.
That dialogue is so important. We need to communicate more with each other. I mean, we have this situation at the moment between Ukraine and Russia where they don't appear to be talking with each other. Instead, they're just throwing bombs at each other, and of course making the situation worse and worse. We can't afford war anymore, and the real solution in any sort of dispute or war situation is to talk with each other, to sit around the table and to compromise. You can't afford the luxury of just sort of, sticking your ground and no, I will not make any concessions. You've got to find a way to meet on the level and resolve those differences, whether it's in a very local basis or an international basis as we have here.
Well, and we're just going to go on to talk about what is the Ageless Wisdom perspective on all of this. There are two things that really underpin that perspective. One is reincarnation, and it's very much tied to the other, which is evolution of consciousness. According to this perspective, each of us lives many, many, many lives, hundreds of thousands of lifetimes. That this teaching says we are souls who take incarnation successive times, and each time that we're born, we may be in a different type of family, a different part of the world, a different economic situation, poor or rich, with opportunities, without. And as a result, all of us have been, all of us have been men, have been women, have been poor, have been rich, have been oppressed, have been oppressors. We've been everything, and we continue to go through this process in order to learn. That's what the whole purpose of it is. So the evolution of consciousness is for our awareness and our consciousness to grow, and we grow through experience. So when you see it from this point of view, Megan, what you were just talking about with people in a conflict, in a war, for example, who refuse to make accommodations or to bend, to do any type of mediation, you can see that if you took this perspective of the Ageless Wisdom, then you'd realize, well, I've been in your shoes before, you've been in mine, so surely we can find common ground. It's a completely different way of looking at things.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there, that really people need to be educated about who we actually are. And we're not just this person we see in the mirror now. We are many different people that we've been through many, many lifetimes. And that in itself, I think, would change our attitude towards each other. So education is vital ultimately, isn't it?
Yeah.
But initially, just to see that we are one and that we are all part of one family.
I often feel as though I have certain affinities for other cultures or other religions or other things that I'm pretty sure are informed by my past lives, so maybe everybody kind of has this sort of level of comfort, where they feel somehow at home in a place where they've never been in this lifetime. So I think that if we all kind of came to recognize that this is part of the plan, that we're all going through these experiences of lifetime after lifetime, it colors us in a certain way to enable us to come to this place of unity, to see that actually it's actually immaterial what race I am this time, or what except to say that I have more responsibility because I come from a wealthy nation. I have more influence potentially to change things, but is to be able to see that I feel equal to, and I feel totally at home with cultures as diverse as Japan or China or the Philippines or Europe, somewhere in Europe. I mean, we're all basically, as human beings, we all want the same things.
Yeah.
So
I think with wealth comes responsibility. Like, we do have the power to make things better in the poorer areas of the world. And I know there's a certain complacency out there that people that might actually believe in reincarnation and say that, people chose to be born in that country, chose to be poor. Well, I don't think anyone chooses to be poor. It's not a choice that anyone would make. So we need to sort of step up to the plate and realize, well, we have the power to make a difference. And actually, that's really invigorating to know that you can help the world situation. through discussions like this, but also getting in touch with governments, protesting, like particularly the young people do. There are many ways in which we can change things for those who
agency. We all
Yes,
have
there is.
agency. We have agency that people don't have,
Yeah.
so much of the time. I've had so many interesting conversations with people that I would have never spoken to from other places, except in the circumstances that I found myself in, coming across people in my town, for example, where when you realize, when you have a conversation with people, I mean, I think a lot of people are really afraid of difference. And it just bridges the gap immediately when you sit down and talk to somebody and find out where they're from and what they're doing and why and what happened to them. And it makes you feel like this injustice, we have to do something about it. Makes you want to do something, to be more active in trying to change things.
Well, communication is a powerful tool. Absolutely. And it always increases awareness of the people doing it and the people listening, for example, like right now. And we wanted to just go on and talk about how this evolution of consciousness takes place through different types of incarnation. So this little chart just shows these different kind of strata. You have the animal kingdom at the bottom, then the human kingdom, then disciples and initiates, and then the spiritual kingdom with the masters of wisdom. And what we're trying to show here is just that consciousness is evolving, going from the lower levels, if you want to call it that, like the animal kingdom, up through these different levels. So, for example, animals, according to the Ageless Wisdom teaching, have group consciousness, not individualized. That is, they don't have an awareness of themselves as an individual in the same way we do. But over many, many millions of years, at some point, they will individuate just as we did, and they will then incarnate as human beings. And we ourselves are in a process, a constant process of growth of our consciousness, and we're being stimulated all the time to grow. And as we do that, we will enter into this next kind of level, disciples and initiates, people who have started to sort of grow into an awareness of themselves as a person participating in this great plan of evolution. And at a certain point, you will become a master of wisdom. That is very mind-blowing to think about, because it means that the same potential exists in each of us that we will see in these people. For example, someone like Jesus of Nazareth. To imagine that one of us would become like him, that's quite amazing. But at the same time, there's a spiritual stimulus top down. So each kingdom is being stimulated by the one above it. And so it's a constant process that we're all in all the time.
Maybe worth mentioning that the masters, they don't have mastery over us. They have mastery over themselves, and also mastery over the energies that are streaming into the planet. And a big part of their work is to so direct those energies that can stimulate positive change, but not at too fast a rate. I mean, I think some people are scared of change, and from our information, it happens in a very gradual way, with all parties having some measure of agreement with what's going on. It's not going to be like in the movies where everything seems to happen at once.
Right.
Evolution is a gradual thing, and it's not going to stick unless everyone agrees to it, whatever that change might be.
Right. And so the masters of wisdom, Maitreya is one of them. He's sort of the head of that group, and they have completed their evolutionary journey on Earth, meaning basically they don't need to reincarnate anymore. And they compose what is called the spiritual hierarchy. That's their group, and they facilitate our evolution through their disciples. So it's all stepped down from one level to the next. And there's 63 of them who are connected with our evolution, with human evolution. And they are here to help us. They don't have to be here. They aren't obliged to be here, but they do it as an act of service. And so knowing we have this help is a tremendous boost, I think.
Sure. I'm personally somebody who has been following this story a long time. I don't know how I would have gotten through the last 30 years without this information, because I mean, everything has been seeming over time to just fall apart, right? Because it is. The dispensation that we're leaving, the Piscean age, that supported all of the energies that gave support to the institutions of that time are now withdrawn. So basically all these institutions are falling apart. And we can see that even the people governing us represent an old paradigm. They don't represent the current one. It's very clear. So I'm very grateful personally to know that we have support, because a lot of people, I think a lot of young people, unfortunately today, feel really hopeless about things because it looks much more dire than it did when I was their age. So I think we have
to, those of us who have read the information about Maitreya and the Masters through Benjamin Creme have that overview, which is very reassuring. We can see there's actually a pattern in the chaos, that we are going through a very difficult phase. I mean, we're literally between two ages, so of course there's going to be a lot of turmoil, but ultimately we come out the other side fine, that we will build a much better civilization that is an example of unity and diversity. But it's going to take a while, and we're going to need all hands on deck to do that building.
That's right. The masters can only inspire us. We have to do it ourselves.
Well, and their perspective on why we're different from each other brings in discussion of the 7 rays, which are 7 great streams of energy, each one distinct from the other, with different qualities, and which stimulate different qualities in us. And these rays influence not just individual people, but nations or countries. So you can see very clearly when you look at different countries that they have different qualities, or they emphasize different things. Different things are important to them, just as with individual people. And also within each person and within each nation or country, these rays, these 7 great energies, are also expressed at both the soul level and the personality level. So when we talk about personality, we mean the person you see when you look at somebody and you're talking to them, that you're seeing their personality, you're seeing their physical body, you're experiencing their mind, their emotions. That's their personality. And you don't see the soul, it's not visible, but that's actually the source of the personality. That is, the personality is an expression of the soul. And so the different levels are colored by and express these different energies, these 7 rays. And I think it's a fascinating area of study just to understand what that means for who we are, but also you see it everywhere around you. If you look at music, for example, the 7 notes in an octave, it's everywhere. Colors, yeah.
Another interesting thing is that each nation around the world has its own unique spiritual purpose, according to esotericism. And eventually we will all discover what those purposes are, and as a nation we'll be more focused on achieving that mission, if you like.
Yeah, speaking on that subject, I think on the next slide we're going to move on to the master's perspective on our process of mixing races, religions, and cultures, right? So there's a great experiment going on. And there are 3 specific great experiments, actually, building national identities in new ways, different ways of creating unity in diversity, and being done in 3 different ways in the UK, USA, and Russia. And this information comes from the Alice Bailey books, I believe. She wrote a book actually about what was it called? Destiny of the Nations, I think it's called, right?
Yep.
So in the UK, representatives of all the people of the Commonwealth of Nations live together more or less peacefully, while strongly maintaining their separate identities. So you guys can speak more to that, because both of you are living in Commonwealth countries.
Well, I'd like to speak about that very specifically in terms of my experience growing up in Canada. I am from a multicultural family. My father was born in India, and my mother was born in Switzerland, and I grew up here. And so I experienced multiculturalism in my home right from day one. And one of the things that I saw growing up was that the Canadian government promoted and supported by giving grants to people who wanted to form multicultural associations. So what they were doing was to help people to promote their own background, their ethnic or cultural background. So for example, I remember my parents were part of this, different groups that were formed by my parents and their friends in the area of being from India or Pakistan. So, for example, the Indo-Canadian Women's Association is an organization that still exists and works very, very much with women from India and Pakistan to help them in any area of their lives, whether it's integrating into Canada or whether it's to deal with abuse in the home or any kind of issue. And so one of the things that happens here is a festival every summer in Edmonton called Heritage Days. And the whole idea is to celebrate the heritage of all of us. So every group who wants to can come together and apply to have a little, well, it's not actually little, it's quite big, a kind of a pavilion or tent in this big park in the center of the city. And in your tent, then you can do whatever you want to show your culture. You can do dance performances, music performances, you can have food tables. And so it's a weekend of this huge festival where you have, now I think it's, I don't know, I think it's over 100 different groups showing their culture. And so that's very much what is described here, while strongly maintaining separate identities. That means each cultural group maintains its identity. You don't try to lose that. You're very, very much wanting to maintain it, but share it with each other and celebrate it and learn about each other.
One example we have here, and you just reminded me, I used to love going to these yearly festivals that showcased the Pacific Island countries. And again, you'd have this rather big pavilion for each island group and representing their culture, their food, their music, and so on. And it was wonderful. It felt like you were actually visiting, island hopping, going to each of these pavilions, and just wonderful atmosphere, a feeling of unity, feeling like that you were, sharing cultures with each other.
It's
so what about the US? Do you want to explain what it's like over there?
Makes me think of Disneyland. It's a small world, or the Epcot Center. I mean, I think that we just underestimate how important this is, right? How important it is that we learn to see each other as just human beings who are having an experience in a different place, but we're so much alike in so many ways. We have to come to that understanding. But going back to the 3 experiments, the U.S. is another experiment, an amalgam of representatives of many European countries, transplanted across the ocean, mixing together until something new emerges. This is from Benjamin Crimm's, I think this is a quote from one of his books, An American. And so, I think it's interesting because having grown up in the United States, I really, as a child, had no fear or concern about people from other cultures or anything like that, because everybody was from someplace else. I mean, I grew up in different neighborhoods in both the East Coast and the West Coast, and I feel like there is a fairly large amount of integration to different than what I experience here in Germany, which is largely still very German. It's surrounded by 8 countries. But as an American, I just feel as though of course, we still have racism. Of course, we still have a long way to go in terms of understanding each other in that country, especially. But I didn't fear any difference growing up because there was difference all around me. People looked different and they came from different places. My first grade teacher was from India.
Mm-hmm. Well, and one of the ways that the difference is described between the U.S. and the Commonwealth countries is that in the U.S., the word is used melting pot.
Right.
You bring all these different people from different places, but they all come there to become an American. Like it's a different emphasis. It doesn't mean that you're not also celebrating your background and maintaining it, but it's just a different way of doing it, I think.
I agree totally. But the 3rd experiment is Russia. The independent states of the old USSR are maintaining their independence, but remain part of a vast federation. And I'd always thought of Russia as being a place where the East and West kind of meet pretty well, So that's basically another major hierarchical experiment taking place in the world for centuries. So I don't know how much time we have. Do we want to?
Well, we have some quotes just to end off the show. So this is something, Megan, that you found. Do you want to read it out from BBC World Histories?
Sure. So migration, whether forced or free, created large-scale shifts in demographics and the establishment of I don't know how to pronounce that word. Diaspora communities. These communities have contributed to the culture, ideas, and wealth of the countries in which they settled, creating the globalized world that is so familiar to us today. So migration has happened since the dawn of time, basically, hasn't it? And so we've always had these issues, I suppose, integrating people, new people into an existing culture, but also how the culture has benefited from the new ideas, new ways of doing things, and grown from that. Sometimes it's been forced integration. I mean, slavery has been a big thing through history, hasn't it? But nevertheless, ultimately, you have a much more rich and interesting and strong civilization for that diversity.
Absolutely. And, you know, when you look at genetics, it's well known that if you don't have enough new genes coming in to mix with what you've already got there, for example, if people intermarry within the same family or community over generations, that weakens people physically.
There are places like Iceland where that's an issue, apparently.
Yeah, so it's just another way of looking at the fact that bringing in new energy, new ideas, new everything is very important and really stimulates and strengthens all of us. And I just wanted to comment on the word diaspora. That just refers to, for example, a diaspora community is a community that is, say, people from India and Pakistan who live here in Canada. They are a diaspora from India or Pakistan. I don't know the etymological origin of the word diaspora, but that's what it means.
Yeah, there's often they use it when they're talking about Tibet, you know, the Tibetan Buddhist philosophies that are now so prevalent in so many parts of the world. They've taken their ship on the road because of the Chinese invasion of Tibet, which has been from many angles an atrocity, but they would not have been dislodged from their place if that hadn't happened. So some people have said it's actually benefited the world greatly that the Tibetans were forced to flee and came into the West as a result.
Well, because Tibet was very closed from the rest of the world, wasn't
it? Yeah.
So we didn't benefit from knowing anything about them prior to that.
That's right.
And I'll just go quickly through the rest of these. We have some quotes up here. We have no hope of solving our problems without harnessing the diversity, the energy, and the creativity of all our people. And this is from an American lawyer and civil rights leader, Roger Wilkins. Megan, you found this quote. And then we have one from Mahatma Gandhi. Our ability to reach unity and diversity will be the beauty and the test of our civilization. And I think that's very well said. And just to go to
a big challenge, haven't we, really, to do that? But it's a challenge worth tackling.
Absolutely, and necessary. I don't think we have a choice about it.
Yeah.
And this is just to reiterate what we've been saying about unity, that the inner reality of our lives is unity, in fact. But in the Ageless Wisdom teaching, they talk about it all the way down to the level of the atom, and say that every atom is connected to every other atom in cosmos. So we are connected to each other. It's not just a nice idea or a feeling, but they're saying it's actually the truth of our reality, down all the way down to the atom.
It's amazing, isn't it, when you think about it?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, actually, along those lines, there's a really nice quote. I guess we're going to read all the quotes because there's one.
Well, we can go through some of them. Yeah. Do you want to read this one, Elisa?
Sure. When man sees the universe and himself as one, all things become possible. We have to see ourselves as one and at one with the universe, that there is no difference between us and the universe, that we are intrinsically related to every other being on earth and everything on earth, that the atomic structure which makes up everything we can see in the whole of cosmos, There is only unity.
Wow.
The Art of Cooperation. There's a couple of other quotes from The Art of Cooperation.
That's right. Yeah. Therefore, this longing for unity, this joining of groups, this growingness of groups, and in this new age of Aquarius, this group endeavor will become the endeavor. Nothing of any great import will be attempted on an individual basis. It is the age of the group, expanding the activity until the whole world is working together, expressing the basic unity of planet Earth. And that's also
hard to imagine, isn't it? Because at the moment we're also
yeah.
competing with each other. Imagine if everyone was cooperating, what a difference that would make. It's
Incredible.
beyond our ability to imagine at the moment.
We have to imagine it. It can't happen unless we do. We have to imagine it.
Well, and that's why I love these quotes, because they paint the picture of something that hasn't happened yet. And yet,
yes,
as you say, Elisa, we have to envision it in order to make it happen.
I think the young people are able to envision it much more easily. They have much more of a sense of unity than generally speaking, older people.
Do you want to read this one, Megan?
Yeah, all people are seeking unity. That is why they join or form themselves into groups. At the same time, everyone wants to express his or her individuality, that unique quality of every incarnated soul.
Yeah. And I'm going to skip ahead a little bit just because we're getting low on time. I'm going to go up to this one here. Elisa, do you want to read this one?
Sure. In this coming time, we shall have to make a shift in consciousness to include every aspect of our being in our definition of spiritual. All our structures must be based on the inner oneness of humanity and reflect that reality. As souls, we are one. We have to create political, economic, and social systems which allow that inner divinity to express itself. The inner reality is man's oneness, a shared divine nature which is potential in every single human being and which needs the correct outer forms to allow the inner radiance to be expressed.
And that's from my Transmission Volume 1. And I'd like to just continue to the next one here. Such an essential aspect of the divine plan as unity does not just happen by itself. It has to be cultivated and nourished. It has to be taken care of as a wise gardener cultivates his garden, tending carefully each new bud and shoot. Unity has to be seen as a continuous gain, something into which you put time, energy, and nourishing love, and out of that comes the beauty of the unity, which can only be achieved in that way. That's also from The Art of Cooperation. I think this is very important because it's telling us we have to work at it. It will not happen by itself. And I wanted to mention something I just read. I support the UN High Commission on Refugees. And so they send out a little update every now and then. In the one I just got, this is a quote from an elderly lady, 84 years old, Zana. And this is she's talking about her experience of being helped by volunteers after she left her home in Ukraine. And she said, I have received so much support from local people and from other internally displaced people. I feel that all the kindness expressed towards me somehow lifts my spirits and gives me health, and I become stronger. And I think that's such a good description of what happens when we do this work.
Yeah.
How important it is.
Yeah. We're so enriched personally by helping other people, aren't we? That's something maybe not everyone realizes, that you actually, in a way, get more benefit than the person you're helping, which sounds perverse, but it's true. You feel somehow, I don't know, it's I can't even really describe it properly, but it's a wonderful effect from service, from helping others.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I'd like to just end our series of quotes here by going to some that Maitreya said. There's this one. Do you want to read that one, Megan?
Sure. Forget not, my brothers, that you are one, that the Father of all has created you in his divine image, that through you shines the same blessed light of love and truth. The time is coming, my friends, when the light of truth shall shine all around you, when man shall take his brother to his heart and know him as himself.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That really says it all. That really says it all, right? You take your brother
Mm.
to your heart. I mean, this is also going back to what Maitreya says about take your brother's need as the measure for your action and solve the problems of the world. That's what's required, that we see the issues that affect ourselves through our brothers and sisters in the world that are struggling and suffering, and feel the responsibility or the wish to change it.
Yeah. And the very, very last one here, it's a short one from Maitreya's teachings, The Laws of Life. And he said, the time is coming when every house will have a garden. The flowers growing there of different colors are the symbols of the children of the earth. And I think, Megan, you talked about that earlier, about a garden and how much more enjoyable it is when you have different colors and different types of flowers.
Yeah. I mean, we love variety in many ways already. So can we imagine what it would be like if we embrace each other, no matter our differences, well, maybe because of our differences, and create this beautiful garden in the way our society is set up?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we'll just carry on now. We're going to go into the next section, which is about meditation. And before we do that, we just want to describe some of the resources, places where you can get more information. Share-international.org is a wonderful website. It's enormous. There's so much information there. You can spend a lot of time looking through that. There's also the Share International channel on YouTube for videos of Benjamin Creme talking about this and many other topics, and books and downloads from share-ecart.com. There are 4 free downloads, 4 books that you can immediately download and read. The Ageless Wisdom Teaching, Transmission, a meditation for the new age. That's the meditation we're going to do. The Awakening of Humanity, and The World Teacher for All Humanity. And there's also a magazine published 10 times a year called Share International, supported entirely by subscribers. And it brings together a focus on current events and people who are working to improve lives in the world, how that connects with these spiritual teachings from the Ageless Wisdom. There's a master's message in every edition, and it's extremely stimulating, very informative. And then, Elisa, I think you're going to tell us a little about something you do. You have a podcast, right?
Yes, I have a podcast called Mystic Takeaway, and I interview people about their spiritual experiences. And many of my guests have had experiences of meeting the masters in disguise in everyday life, in events that took place that were really mind-blowing and inspiring. And so I have 37 episodes on Mystic Takeaway. I think you'll have a link provided for you there. And I hope you'll take a listen.
Great. And there's another program that you might be interested as well. It's called Planetary Makeover. And this is a program that is pre-recorded, and they have different topics every time. The most recent one was about universal basic income and how that will eliminate poverty. They also are based in the teachings of the Ageless Wisdom, so I highly recommend it. You can just Google Planetary Makeover, and you'll find many different platforms where you can watch their program. And so now to transmission meditation. This is a group meditation, and we'll describe briefly how to do it. It's very, very simple. And before we start, I just want to mention that if you have a pacemaker or serious heart problems, don't do this meditation. Or if you have emotional or psychological imbalances, and the reasons are that the energies are very strong and they can destabilize you if you don't have that kind of stability already. And also if you're under the age of 12, because your chakras won't have formed enough to tolerate or take the energies, again, which are strong. So wait until you are 12 to start doing this meditation. And we used to meet in person weekly before the COVID pandemic. Since that time, many people are meeting virtually, just as we are today. And please see the chat for links where you can find information on how to connect with more groups and to do this if you'd like to do it on a regular basis. So can one of you describe how do we do transmission meditation? What is required?
Just before I suggest Elisa does the description, I'm about to leave, so enjoy your meditation, and thank you very much for letting me participate in the discussion.
Oh, thanks for being here, Megan.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
So to do transmission meditation, it's very straightforward. Basically, all you need to do is put your attention, inner attention, because you're going to probably close your eyes, put your attention on this chakra here, which is called the Ajna center. You just want to focus on that center as much as you possibly can.
And I'll just interrupt to say, when you say this center, you're referring to the spot between your eyebrows, right?
Yes, that's right. It's a chakra, and essentially it links the brain with the soul. So essentially, you want to keep your eyes closed and go sort of inward, and to focus your attention on this center. And when you lose your focus, when you start to think or follow your thoughts, which are inevitably going to come up, you just want to say an inward Om to yourself, and not over and over, but just once. Bring the attention back. Actually, the Om does bring the attention back to that center. And essentially, that's all you really need to know. We're going to say the Great Invocation, which is an invocation given to the world in 1945, the Alice Bailey books. And it's an invocation that actually starts the process of the Master sending the energy through us. And I don't know if there's something else we need to say about it.
Well, just to remind everybody, don't try to send the energy anywhere. It will come into you and go through your chakras, and the masters will direct the energy where they see it's needed. It's quite important not to try to do that ourselves, because we don't know really where it should be going or not going.
I think it's also important to say that you should breathe naturally and not do any specific kind of breathing. Just focus on the center, and you don't have to do anything else other than just naturally breathe.
Right. And after we say the Great Invocation, we will listen to a message from Maitreya. Maitreya transmitted messages telepathically through Benjamin Creme, 140 of them. And so we'll listen to one of those. It just helps with the aligning of ourselves when we're sitting down to meditate. So that's why many groups listen to a message from Maitreya for this reason. And it's also very inspiring. So I guess we're ready to start. Elisa, would you like to say the Great Invocation? I'll mute out and we can all say it together, but we'll hear your voice.
Okay.
Great. And we'll meditate for 30 minutes. That's the idea.
From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth.
Message number 81, September the 12th, 1979.
My dear friends, I am happy indeed to be with you once more and to magnetize your aspiration in this way. My coming evokes in man a desire for change, a desire for betterment, however expressed. My energies engender in man divine discontent. All that is useless in our structures must go. There are many such which are unworthy of man today. Man is an emerging God, and thus requires the formation of modes of living which will allow this God to flourish. How can you be content with the modes within which you now live? When millions starve and die in squalor, when the rich parade their wealth before the poor, when each man is his neighbor's enemy, when no man trusts his brother, for how long must you live thus, my friends? For how long can you support this degradation? My plan and my duty is to reveal to you a new way, a way forward which will permit the divine in man to shine forth. Thus do I speak gravely, my friends and brothers. Hearken well to my words. Man must change or die. There is no other course. When you see this, you will gladly take up my cause and show that for man exists a future bathed in light. My teaching is simple. Justice, sharing, and love are divine aspects. To manifest his divinity, man must embrace these three. Please receive the blessing of Christ. May the divine light and love and power of the one most holy God be now manifest within your hearts and minds. May this manifestation bring you to the realization of your part in the great plan.
It's 30 minutes.
Thank you, John. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for being here. And it's been a wonderful experience. Elisa, thank you for joining us today. Thank you to Cielito and to John for your help technically in putting this show together. And we will be back in a month on May 13th with a program called People Power, an Unstoppable Force for Change, which will really talk about some of what Megan and Elisa were mentioning, the need for change and what we have to do to bring it about. So I hope you can join us then. Thank you very much for being here today, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.